Hi, good morning, and welcome to the ZP Developer Zone webinar. So we like to do this webinar a couple of times a week. We've been doing it more recently because basically the number of questions that are coming in, but let me sort of essentially jump straight into it. And so today's the 18th of January, it's approximately 8 a.m. London time. And as I say, we like to do this on a kind of weekly note. It's probably worth saying that a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is SenseItAll. So SenseItAll for me is it's a step on from traditional lab instruments, because SenseItAll really is about, actually I want to work on an application or I want to work on a product, and I don't want to start at the very beginning of kind of lab instruments where you've got cables trailing all over the place and you're sort of trying to figure out the settings. In fact, no, the SenseItAll can be used with any of the sensors on the ZP website. And it's really a sort of an acceleration in development of products. But let me go forward with that in a bit more detail, but that will be something that I do talk about today. There is a SenseItAll webinar on the 24th of January. I know some of the questioners today have already been to that webinar, so if you've been, of course you've been. There's always updates, I would say, so it's possibly worth sometimes just sort of stepping back in and seeing some of the updates. One thing about ZP is it's never a static vehicle. Let's say we're always I would say when I say we're always developing, we're always improving, to be honest with you, kind of layering features and benefits on top of what we already have. So it's not a kind of random walk. There's a direction, but every month essentially the technology stack gets more sophisticated. So anyway, there's a webinar on the 24th of January. If you see a link, I must remember to put these links underneath the video at the end so you can basically find these links. But whether you're in India or in Europe, please just sign up for the SenseItAll webinar anyway. Especially if you're in India, you can click for the morning webinar. And if you're in the USA or Canada or South America, click for the afternoon webinar, because that will kind of cover your time zones. It's probably worth saying as well that ZP, though I am going to get into the specific questions in a minute, ZP does do corporate and consulting workshops. So what I mean by that is we are doing a workshop on continuous sensors and also discrete measurements, and we'll be doing that in Norway on the 5th and 6th of March. So there's a quick link to that here. These are very practical workshops as well, by the way. Everyone gets to make a biosensor, everyone gets to test a biosensor. You can see the process of making a biosensor and also sort of how we sort of program the instruments accordingly. So if you're interested, then that will be on the 5th and 6th of March in Norway. We also do corporate workshops. These really kind of work for much larger organizations. And we've done these, sort of typical companies, can be quite large. They're able to sort of produce 10 to 20 people who are all interested in this, and then we can come on site and do those corporation workshops as well. So I'll put a link here as well. We're also doing a conference in the UK on the commercialization of electrochemical assays, and I'll put a link to that. Now on to the questions. How to program the SenseItAll. So this is, we've had a questioner, they've signed up for things like Julie and webinars, and they'd like to ask questions. So one of their questions is how to program the SenseItAll platform. Because I think for ZP, kind of going forward, people who are trying to develop technologies, it's really the SenseItAll platform. And the SenseItAll platform, I mean, is it really a sort of, it's the end point of, for me, probably a 23-year journey. And for ZP, a sort of, it's something that we've been building up for the last 10 years. So it's one integration of a lot of money and a lot of effort. So it's a real sort of leap pad for anyone who's trying to get into sensor and biosensor applications. And I'll talk about it, how to program it. This is just a very simple question. What's the size of the hypervalue screen printed electrode? I've already answered this one to the person. It's 4.15 millimeters squared, but I'll go over that just very quickly. Measuring glucose on the single-purpose biosensor circuit, I will mention that very quickly, and then potentiostats for glucose and other analytes, which is something I'll also touch upon today. So the question here is how to program the SenseItAll platform. I will sort of go through this a few times today, but the first thing to say is that many of our sensors, and when I say many, I'll list those out in a minute, how we program the SenseItAll platform is essentially through a QR code. So if it's a glucose sensor, there's a QR code for it. If it's a nitrate sensor, there's a QR code for it. If it's a pH sensor, there's a QR code for it. This question about how do you tell the electronics whether there's a code or not is actually one of the questions that comes up later on in about question 3. But question number 1 actually wanted, how do I program this thing? Well, how we program it is actually through QR codes. The QR code tells the app. So when we look at the hardware, we have hardware and we have an app. That app, and I will describe this in a bit. How do I program that app to tell that meter what to do? See, the meter, I don't program it directly. I actually program the app, and the app then tells it tells the meter what to do. So your kind of route to the hardware is actually through a QR code. So the person who's asking the question, in fact, there we are. They're scanning the QR code probably at that point there, actually on there, and then it goes to the chili sensor. So in fact, she just did it then. So the QR code tells the app what to do. The sensor goes into the meter. The app tells the meter what to do, and the assay is run, and the app gets all the raw signal back, and then the app actually sends all the raw signal to the Julie cloud. I mean, and then you actually get a concentration back on your phone. I mean, that's a lot of technology stack there. We're talking about a sensor, we're talking about electronics, we're talking about app development, we're talking about clouds at least. So that's a lot of technology stacks there. So you can understand actually how much value is actually, wrapped up in all of that. And what's really kind of cool then, obviously, I would think it was cool, is that actually the user gets an answer on the phone. But for people who are trying to develop new applications, you can actually get the raw data in the cloud as well. So we, for example, we use this technology stack in one of our products, which is the chili sensing. And it really means I can support people online in real time because I can actually see their data, only because they choose to share it with me, by the way. So there's a real transparency, and you are not excluded for being scientifically involved in this hardware stack. It'll put the raw data into the cloud. And then you can actually also it means you can share it with other people who are also on that cloud system, including us or including your other team people. So the quick answer to your question is, well, how do I program that SenseItAll platform? The quick answer is, you don't program it as such. We tell all the settings are sent to the app through the QR code. So when it's new assays, for example, at ZP, we develop a new QR code, and literally the app is ready to go. I will probably describe this in a bit more detail here, but it's probably worth saying that on the SenseItAll at the moment, we have customers using SenseItAll with glucose, potassium, pH, and nitrate. So those QR codes do exist because, I mean, as we go through, we've got something like 40 sensors this year that in the end they'll all have their own QR codes. We're capable of doing it. It's just as the market requires it or the market demands it, then we'll do sort of new QR codes. So again, the answer to your question is, how do I program the SenseItAll to do what I want to do? It's programmed through the QR code. And I know you'll ask the question, well, how do I generate the QR code? So first of all, let me talk about a demo. So in a bit, if you've got a smartphone, I realize that people are actually probably sometimes following this on their smartphone, so that's a bit awkward. But I'll do a quick sort of demo and just say, we've got the hardware. So, why should you even care about the SenseItAll? Well, the hardware is the first sort of reason for caring. It's pretty neatly done. There's no slots trying to slot in awkward sensors. You can take it apart really quickly and kind of give it a wipe down and a clean. So, so that's quite a nice feature. As you know, there's an entire technology stack, here where the engineer is, in fact, there we are, scans the QR code. So that's what programs the hardware what to do. So essentially then that QR code has all the method files in order to run that particular assay. So that's what happens there. Then they take a sample, they put the sample on the sensor, which is happening here, and then she'll run it But then there's also the part here where actually the data goes to the cloud. And as I say, you can do this yourself in a minute, where you can actually just scan QR codes and actually see how the app effortlessly changes. So that's the demo that you can run for yourselves. So what I would suggest is, here's the one for the Android store. So I think most people these days it's more are on Androids, but of course there's also the Apple store. So you can see that we've already figured out the deployment part of this. How do we deploy new applications? Well, this app already exists. The first thing that happens when you do the app is you'll have to generate a username and password. But that's good, see, because actually what you don't realize then is actually what it's doing is it's actually opening up a cloud account for you as well. And then you can scan these different QR codes, and those QR codes show you that this one app can effortlessly move from sensor or assay to assay to assay. So the answer to your question is, how do I program that SenseItAll platform to do what I want to do? The answer is, once we understand what the parameters are, we can generate a QR code, and it will that QR code is the sort of essentially the programming interface. So how the software works is we have a SenseItAll app, which I'm sort of calling the distribution or deployment app. That's what is residing on the app, or on the Apple Store rather, or the Play Store from Google. That's the deployment app. When you open it up, it's going to ask, it'll install it, and it will actually ask you, can it access your camera? Because the next part then is that you're going to be able to scan a QR code. And when you scan a QR code, the next time you open up the app, it will just default to the last QR code that it scans. So you don't have to keep on scanning QR codes. So you can imagine a sort of user experience where the device arrives, they scan a QR code that installs the software. Then there's a QR code to tell the software what assay to run, and really they're good to go. Because you're not really, in most sort of product launches, you're not really expecting to go from assay to assay to assay. But these different QR codes will take them to different assays. Now we'd like to get to a self-service QR code. So the question is really asking, well, how do I program this? Well, we would like to get to a self-service QR code. And I'll sort of describe work that is going on this self-service. So the self-service QR code is kind of saying, all right, so at the moment, if I want to run a new sensor, and I've developed that sensor in-house, and I understand my the method file that I require, I might not want ZP in the loop. I might want to just do this myself. So we're developing a system where you can basically say, I want to do what's called open circuit potential. If some of these terms are not clear, there is a workshop on the 5th and 6th of March in Norway. Sign up for that, and essentially we can go over this there. But what's your method? Is it open circuit potential? Is it amperometry? Is it voltammetry? And we're also going to add EIS, but I've left EIS off for the minute. When I say EIS, electrochemical impedance spectroscopy, because it's the more complicated one to implement. Question number 2 is, having chosen whether it's open circuit potential, amperometry, or voltammetry, question number 2 then is, what's your measurement time? Now, by default, 100 seconds, because at ZP, at this moment, I'm imagining people developing what I think about point of care rapid tests. I'm also aware of continuous, of course. But if you default it at 100 seconds, see, most people are not that patient. You can't have tests that, take sort of 5 minutes because people just walk away from them. So we default on a measurement time of 100 seconds, but that can be changed. The save rate is 1 second, because with most assays, if you're kind of running the assay over 100 seconds, then 100 data points is enough to get a quality information out of them. But that's also changeable as well. At which point then, because open circuit potential is so simple, you only need 2 parameters, which is measurement time and save rate. We can, at which point, generate the QR code, and we can save and name it. And that's it. So the question is, how do I program that instrument? And the answer is, I'm kind of quite influenced by the no-code movement. So there is no coding as such. It's through the QR code. Which is ironic. And so you have to understand what method you're going to use. And if you don't understand what method you're going to use, then you probably have to consult. I just want to say good morning to Aftab. Morning, Aftab. So you first of all have to understand what method you're going to use. If you're not sure what method you're going to use, then you have to consult with ZP. And open circuit potential is quite an easy methodology. There's only really two parameters, which is measurement time and save rate. Now with amperometry, I've used the proper term here, poise potential. I don't like the word poise potential. It just means what voltage am I going to apply to my working electrode here. And I've put a default of 500 millivolts, but you can change it. What's the measurement time? Again, I've kind of, thinking about that user experience, I've put default of 100 seconds. It's always good to be quicker. Sometimes you have to extend it, but just giving people a guidance, save rate 1 second, at which point you can generate it and you can save it. So again, the answer to your question is how do I program the SenseItAll platform? And it's not programmed, it's told what to do through QR codes. And at the moment, we generate those QR codes. So if somebody wants to measure a glucose sensor, they can just scan the QR code. We put all the right parameters in there, and it's good to go. But we do understand that people might want to self-service on this, and actually then they'll have to have their own QR code generator. That's something we're working upon, but at the moment it's not there, but this is what we're working upon. Some assays are run by voltammetry. With voltammetry, there's a sort of start and end potential. There's a first vertex is what potential do I go to in the first stage, what potential do I go to in the second stage, what's my scan rate and number of cycles. So we've put like default values down here because we kind of have a lot of experience at ZP about actually assays, and whether it's open circuit potential or amperometry or voltammetry, we kind of know where the good place to start is, which is half the battle because people don't know where to start with this kind of stuff. And again, you can then generate the QR code and save and name the QR code. So that's how people are going to independently be able to program that SenseItAll platform independently of ZP. It's completely change of direction at this point. This is a very quick question. What is the size of the working electrode on the hypervalue carbon screen printed electrode? This is what they're referring to. I'll be very quick. It's 4.15 millimeters squared. And just out of interest, we've got a new screen printed electrode, which I think is quite nice for academia and R&D because it's circular, so it does allow you to just be able to pipette onto that surface, and it's easy to pipette a drop, and the drop will essentially spread across the surface of that working electrode. I'll put a couple of links here. If you see links, then I'll remember to put the links underneath the video at the end as well. So question number 3 is really about the ZP micropot. Right, so the ZP micropot, so at this moment, we call it the single purpose biosensor circuit because single purpose means that we've essentially, if somebody wants to measure glucose on that micropot, in their order, they say that it's for glucose, at which point we will have programmed the micropot for glucose sensors, for ZP glucose sensors before shipping. So that's why it's single purpose. So can the ZP, so they call it micropot here, we call it single purpose biosensor circuit. Yes, it can measure glucose sensors. When you order it, the support guy that you're talking with, I know who it is, will have told us it's for a glucose sensor, and we will have programmed it accordingly. There's no separate software needed. I will talk in a minute. There is a data sheet, and in the data sheet it talks about a serial connection between the laptop and the circuit. If so the quick answer is there's no separate software. The micropot will just send data through the serial connection. And this question here is very interesting. Does it recognize the sensor that's connected automatically? And I will answer that question in a minute. First thing to say, there is a data sheet on this. Now, if you're reading the data sheet and it's really not that clear, then I would actually suggest that not to get this particular device because it's probably intended for sort of engineers and electronic engineers. Now, in many companies, you do have these people, so they should be able to read this data sheet quite clearly. So the first answer is it can be used with a glucose sensor. The second answer is the interface is in that document. And so if you can read it and make sure that you understand it. If you can't understand it, then I really think the platform for you is actually the SenseItAll platform. And because there it sort of takes out it there, the SenseItAll platform will take care of all the settings. It will grab the raw data for you, and you'll be able to get that raw data in your hand. So I'm going to describe that SenseItAll platform again now. First of all, does the ZP recognize the connected sensor automatically? And the answer is no. But this is the demo that I'd like you to do to kind of understand what the technology stack that we have can do. I mean, don't forget, this technology stack at this point has definitely had over 10 million spent on it, no doubt about it whatsoever. So first of all, part of your demo is please scan this QR code if you're on an Android. The second part of your demo is if you're on a iOS or an iPhone, scan this QR code. When you've done that, you will have to do a username and password, and then you're essentially into the system. Then scan this code and see what happens, and it should the app should start saying, oh, well, we're going to do a chili assay. Then scan this code. I'll scan the code, scan again, and you should get ginger, and if you scan again, you should get total antioxidative status. The reason I bring this up is because your question is, can the ZP micropot automatically detect the sensor that's being used? And the answer is no, but we do have technology to do that, and it's part of our SenseItAll stack. And so do this demo where you install the software on your smart device or smartphone and scan these codes and see how you can go between different assays. And then know that, in fact, at this very moment, we're delivering now a total antioxidative status. So when you look at ZP, we've got something like 40 sensors just on the web store. So total antioxidative status is one of the sensors on the web store, and there is a QR code for that. I will come to it again in a minute, but I've described it already. But the way that our systems would know what sensor was in place was because we have the app, which is available on those stores. You scan in the app. The app has to access the phone on your smart device, by the way. And then when you scan these different codes, then the app will essentially know what sensor you're about to run. So the answer to your question is, ZP is able to provide any of our sensors with a QR code, and by scanning that QR code on your smart device, then it will basically reprogram the SenseItAll platform to do what you want. So we do have a way of telling hardware what sensor is being used, and it's the QR code, and the QR code will tell that app what to do. The app tells the meter what to do. The data goes to the app. The data goes up to Julie. You get a result, but also you get the raw signal. So you will actually get the raw signal up in the cloud, and you can share it with your colleagues, or you can share it with ZP as well. And when I say share, it's not sending files by email. It's sharing via the cloud. I'm just going to do a last piece here, which is around Potentiostats. So at ZP, we think that there are people out there, like in the agricultural industry or in the medical industry or in the biotech industry, that need sensors. And there are people who are trying to provide solutions to those people. And so we've got this SenseItAll technology because it basically moves people from ideas to actually being able to deliver something quite tangible really quickly. Because we have a whole bunch of sensors, we have the SenseItAll platform, we can move all of our sensors onto that SenseItAll platform, and we can deliver the SenseItAll platform plus sensors to you, the developer. At which point then you can actually give it to the end users and they can start to use it. And all their data will go to the cloud. So in real time, you're actually able to see the data appearing in the cloud. And that means then, and there's also an API in here, this is an application program interface. And it means that you can look at the data in real time and improve any application, or when I say application, there's, sample prep. You can improve the algorithm extraction, how to actually get information out of that data. That can be improved. So you're in an iteration, or you're in a cycle of them collecting, you looking, you improving, them collecting, you seeing, you improving. So you're in a cycle with them. And that kind of rapid improvement is a kind of a lean, sort of startup mentality, which has been around for a good decade now. So the answer to your question is, Well, you had a few questions in there. Yes, the ZP micropot can be worked with glucose sensors. No, you don't need extra software, but have a look at that data sheet. Make sure that if it's clear to you, that's good. If it's not clear to you, I think you need to come onto the SenseItAll platform. As it is, your third question is, well, will the software automatically identify the sensor? In our SenseItAll platform, it will, because of this QR code. But that micropot is pre-programmed to actually be a glucose micropot, and therefore it can't then change between different sensors. But the SenseItAll platform actually can. And today, the SenseItAll platform, we're shipping SenseItAll with glucose, we're shipping it with potassium, we're shipping it with pH, we're shipping it with nitrate. And I realize we're also shipping it with TAS as well, but that just dropped off there as well. If you want to take a much more step back into an R&D world, then you can take a Potentiostat. I think the Anapod EIS is probably the best option. You need cables, so this is a LEMO 5-pin connector, so you definitely have that cable. And then I've identified here the 7mm connector for our sensor. So you can take a real sort of R&D step backwards, not step backwards, but step back, and actually just work with Potentiostats. And these are the Potentiostats that I would recommend. So how to program the SenseItAll platform. So at the moment, you don't program it, you actually guide it through those QR codes. At the moment, we don't have the self-service method, so you have to work with ZP at the moment to get those QR codes, but in the future that will be self-service. What is the size of the hypervalue screen printed carbon electrode? 4.15 millimeters squared. You can measure glucose on the single purpose biosensor circuit, but you may be on the edge of going from that to actually SenseItAll. And then I have identified the potentiostat for glucose and other analytes, Anapod EIS, the right cable and the right connector. And any links, I'll make sure I put them underneath this webinar now. So I will say thank you very much. I will stop, but I'll start manually copying those links across and putting them underneath the video. If you've got any questions, as always, simply don't hesitate to reach out to us at ZP. Okay, and special thanks to Aftab this morning. Lovely to see you, man. Take care. Bye-bye.